Councilmember Harlan. Here. Councilmember Bertrand.
Here.
Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Bottorff. Here. Mayor Termini.
Here, would you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This meeting is cablecast live on Charter Communications, Cable TV Channel 8, and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. It is being recorded to be rebroadcast on the following Wednesday at 8 a.m. and on Saturday following the first rebroadcast at 1 p.m. on Charter Channel 71 and Comcast Channel 25. There'll be a test on that afterwards, I'll let you know. Meetings can also be viewed from the city's website, www.cityofcapitola.org. Our technician tonight is Lynn Dutton. Please turn your cell phones off. And please, when you come up to speak to us, if you sign in at the podium prior to speaking. And we're going to start tonight with one of my favorite things, and that is a proclamation for our friends at the Red Cross. Michelle, come on up. We have a microphone. Get you the spotlight here. No.
Yeah, we go.
You don't get away with podium. No. You don't get away with just podium. You want a picture on your camera?
I would love that. Yeah, thank you.
I might note that I've known Michelle for a long time, and I was formerly the chair of the Red Cross for Santa Cruz, and can't say enough good things about the organization, but I'll start by saying some of the good things about the organization. Whereas the American Red Cross experienced a record-breaking year of need in 2017, in just 45 days it responded to back-to-back hurricanes, the deadliest week of wildfires in California history, and the horrific mass shooting in Las Vegas. And whereas the Red Cross also responded to nearly 50,000 home fires and provided recovery assistance to 76,000 families. I'm impressing him. The Central Coast chapter also helped 159 families in the area and installed free 1,627 smoke alarms. The local Red Cross handles an average of 102 emergency military calls each year and collects an average of 6,936 units of blood from generous blood donors. Citizens of Capitola are among those who volunteer to assist their neighbors when they need a helping hand. And every 8 minutes, the Red Cross brings help and hope to people in need. The American Red Cross collects nearly 40% of the nation's blood supply. Through its Restoring Family Links program, the Red Cross connects family members separated by crisis, conflict, or migration. The Red Cross, whereas we dedicate the month of March to all those who support the American Red Cross's mission to provide and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies. We encourage our community to continue its support through donations of time, money, and blood. Now, therefore, I, Michael Termini, Mayor of Capitola, do hereby proclaim March 2018 as Red Cross Month.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mike.
You're on. We need to do about like 10, 15 minutes.
I'll do a tap dance. No, thank you, City Council, Mike. It's been an honor and a joy to know you all these years, and working with the Red Cross is truly an honor. And I get to work alongside an amazing group of volunteers and staff members, and responding to these disasters like we've seen in this last year has been, there's been nothing like it. And it's a joy to get to work with the folks that I do. One of our volunteers is Nick's here. But anyhow, we're going to be installing smoke alarms in May. We had to reschedule the one that we were doing this Saturday just because of the storm and that was coming in. And so we'll be doing it in May. So we're looking forward to getting out, doing more smoke alarms. The Red Cross nationally has installed over 1 million smoke alarms free. So we're making homes and families safer. And it's just, like I said, it's a wonderful organization to be a part of. And thank you so much for the proclamation. It's an honor to be here and get to see you.
Tell me if I'm correct in this, because I always said it, and hopefully it is correct, that the Santa Cruz Monterey Red Cross mobilizes more volunteers around the world than any other Red Cross chapter in the country. Is that true? Is it close? Okay. We are one of the smallest chapters, I might add, and yet more people step forward and at a moment's notice will actually get on a plane and just be somewhere. and under not the best of conditions. We don't put them up the Hyatt or anything. They're on cots. So thank you.
Nick, who's here in the audience tonight, he has been one of those volunteers who's deployed, and he's been there in those times of need. And sleeping in shelters, these folks, they give up weeks of their lives to go and help and to be there, and they're that beacon of hope, during a disaster. And everybody tells us, when I see the Red Cross pulling in, I know that, we're going to make it through this. And there's nothing better than to feel like you're making a difference in somebody's life and giving them hope again. So, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Something I also like to always mention about the Red Cross, the Red Cross and the Red Crescent in other parts of the world work hand in hand without any consideration for race, religion, national origin. They cross all boundaries. No questions asked. So think about that. Let's see. Report on closed session, please.
Thank you, Mayor Termini, members of the City Council. There were 4 items on this evening's closed session, which began at 5:45 p.m. in the City Manager's conference room. First item was a pending litigation item. That would be the case of City of Capitola versus D'Angelo. Council received a report from and gave direction to legal counsel on that item. Second item was a conference with legal counsel involving anticipated litigation, considering initiation of litigation, in which the council received a report and gave direction to legal counsel. Third item was a conference with the city's labor negotiator involving all bargaining groups of the city employee force. Last item was liability claims, specifically the claim of a Norm Gadke, and that is also item 8D on your open session agenda. There was no reportable action.
Thank you. Are there any additional materials to tonight's agenda? Madam City Clerk?
Yes, we received for item 8G 1 public comment, and for item 9A we received a staff memo responding to a packet item, as well as 2 public correspondence.
Very good. Thank you. This is the part of the meeting where anyone from the public can come up and address the council regarding items not on tonight's agenda. So if you have anything to say to the council that we will not be covering later, please step forward now. Seeing none, we'll move on to City Council, Treasurer, and staff comments. We'll start with staff. Staff, do you have any announcements?
Mayor Termini, members of the council, I did want to report that this week the city received its most recent payment of sales tax from the State Board of Equalization. The council will recall that we get 4 basic chunks of payments a year of sales tax. Sales tax is the city's largest and most important revenue stream. This most recent payment was for the Christmas period this last winter, and it's the last sales tax figure that we're going to have before we prepare next year's budget. Unfortunately, the news is not great. Year over year, we saw a 2.8% decline in that sales tax amount. So that will be factored in when we develop next year's budget. At this stage, we don't have the backup. We will be reviewing the backup in coming weeks to try to determine what was the source of the decline. But that will be a factor that will be considered as we develop the budget.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Treasurer, what do you have to tell us?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have something that I thought was interesting. So I'm looking over invoices last week and came across 4 Leaf Consulting, which is a consulting firm that takes care of the fact that we don't have a building inspector. We lost Brian a while back. And the rate for this building inspector is $135 an hour, which I'm sure is a very competitive rate. But that equates to $270,000 a year if it was a salary. You subtract about 35% for benefits, that's still $170,000. Our building inspectors are paid about $99,000 or $100,000. So we could substantially increase the salary of key positions and still save money. So that's particularly interesting because we just lost a senior planner who moved to the county on a similar position for a pay raise. So something to consider. I know the city manager is reluctant to ask for more money in these for that kind of thing in these severe budget constraints, but again, the idea is we could actually save money by increasing some salaries.
Thank you. That's a new tack for you. I appreciate hearing that. Let's come back to the council. Council, Ed, anything to tell us? Kristen.
I just want to quickly thank the Commission on the Environment and the Traffic and Parking Commission for updating their membership policy for allowing youth members. I think that's exciting to have 2 more of our commissions that'll have youth member seats, and I noticed that there are some youth in the audience, so if anyone's interested, several of our boards and commissions now have youth membership. And then also I just wanted to share that last night was the board meeting for the Community Action Board, and they shared that there's a new eviction prevention program that they're working on. So anyone who is in danger of being evicted from their home, there's certain guidelines that need to be met, but in general, you can call the Community Action Board. The number is 831-763-2147, and they can potentially help provide assistance that will keep people in their homes. And I wanted to share that tonight.
That is great information. Stephanie. Nothing? Jacques.
Yeah, last Saturday I went to a transportation justice workshop and got a lot of takeaways in terms of traffic calming in cities and stuff, so I'm going to share that with Steve. He probably knows some of those ideas already. Last night I also went to a presentation at the Central Fire District, and they talked about their standards of coverage. And it was a very interesting presentation. But I'd like if the mayor could...
I was going to call him up after our comments.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I wanted some comments directly from the police fire chief. Yeah, definitely.
Good. Steve, why don't you come on up and talk to us? Welcome.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council, staff. As the council member mentioned, we did have our standards of cover and management analyst report that was released last night to the public, as well as to the board of directors. This report's about 8 months in the making, and we use the consulting firm Citygate. And a standards of cover is basically a report card of what we've done, what we're doing, and what we're going to be looking at in the future. In regards to Central Fire. A lot of good information came out of that. I'm pleased to tell you that your fire department is doing a real good job in most areas. There were some findings of deficiencies, but those deficiencies are minor in nature, and actually we're working on those currently even before the report came out. I am going to leave a copy. There's 2 volumes here with the city manager for City Hall. And you can also review the full report, and the public can review the report on our website, www.centralfpd.com. The one interesting tidbit that came out of the report that was kind of an eye-opener last night was Volume 2. And Volume 2 is all the traffic maps. Part of the study that we paid for was the traffic congestion study. We own those rights now for the next 3 years, and if anybody's interested in the study, they can rent it from us for a small fee. But it's interesting information in regards to the traffic congestion that we're currently facing in Central Fire District, which is obviously part of Capitola, Soquel, and Live Oak. We try to pride ourselves on a 4-minute response time to all areas from 4 stations within the district. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, that 4-minute turnout time works real well for us. But in the middle of the afternoon, we now are at about 8 minutes and 30-second turnout time or response time, and that's based upon the congestion of the traffic that we're facing. So interesting to see how we're going to move forward. Some of the findings of that, or the recommendations of those findings, are, well, we can add more stations, we can move stations around, we can add more resources. So we're going to be looking at some alternative response models instead of building more fire stations or trying to move all our stations around. But if you have any questions for me on that, I'd be happy to answer them, either online or offline, or here or later on. And again, I'll leave this with the city manager for your perusal later. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions of the chief? Thank you, Chief, for all that you do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, and thanks again for the invitation.
And for my comments, in weather like this, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Public Works, who I go to work and it's still dark, and they've already been at work a couple of hours, clearing the storm drains and making things safe and clearing limbs out of the street. So thank you very much. We will move on to the consent calendar.
Mr. Mayor, we did have one other staff comment. Our police chief had one item.
Oh, well, I'm always ready for the police chief.
Good evening, Mayor Termini, members of the council. I wanted to take a couple of minutes tonight to provide some information updated information for some and new information for others with regard to the recent ICE investigation that took place here in the city of Capitola. On Wednesday, March 7th at about 4:15 in the morning, our Police Communications Center, Santa Cruz 911, received information from federal immigration officers that they were conducting an investigation here in the city of Capitola. Federal officials properly notified the police department, as is the requested protocol, and the agents did not request assistance from Capitola PD or other law enforcement agencies. No local public safety assistance was provided, nor was it requested. They completed their investigation about 3 hours later at 7:15 in the morning. We did become aware that 2 persons were arrested as a result of their investigation. They were arrested for civil warrants, taken into custody and transported back to the field office in Santa Clara County. 2 other individuals were detained and released at the scene. We have no further, Capitola PD has no further information on those arrests, the status of the arrests, or any information that led up to the investigation that they were conducting. A couple of points that I want to make sure that I present. Based on the information that we received from our comm center, and specifically to one of our police sergeants, if a request was made for Capitola police resources, we would have declined that request simply because it was outside of our current protocol and outside of the mandates that are contained in Senate Bill 54. I'll touch on some of those in a minute. We did receive several inquiries from the media, local media. They were handled in about 48 hours. And then I'm real happy that the sergeant who handled the notification from the federal, the supervising federal agent was consistent with our department policy and consistent with my expectations. So Senate Bill 54, you all know, was entered into legislation in October of 17 and became effective January 1st of this year. That bill is referred to as, the technical name is the California Values Act. The generic name is a sanctuary state bill. That Senate bill provides many prohibitions, prohibits local and state law enforcement officers from interacting with immigration officials in specific areas, and I want to touch on some of those, actually most of them. State and local law enforcement officers are prohibited from inquiring into a person's immigration status, detaining a person on an immigration detainer or hold request, commonly referred to as a civil warrant, providing personal information to ICE or Customs and Border Patrol unless that information is publicly available, arresting or intentionally participating in arrests based upon civil immigration warrants, assisting immigration authorities in their routine work, which is specifically warrantless searches of vehicles looking for undocumented persons. We are prohibited from doing that. Performing the function of an immigration agent, real important here, or placing local law enforcement officers under the supervision of a federal agency. It's why it's so important that we received that notification and it went directly to one of our patrol sergeants. Using immigration officers as interpreters for law enforcement matters that fall under the jurisdiction of the local or the state agency, and providing office space exclusively dedicated for immigration agents within a county or a city law enforcement facility. On a final note, and I'm going to read this verbatim from our policy. This policy has been in place with the Capitola Police Department for many years, far in advance of SB 54. It is the policy of the Capitola Police Department that all members make personal and professional commitments to equal enforcement of the law and equal service to the public. Confidence in this commitment will increase the effectiveness of this department in protecting and serving the entire community and recognizing the dignity of all persons regardless of their immigration status. So we understand that the immigrants are fearful, and this is not part of the policy. We understand that the immigrants are fearful of being deported by law enforcement. That's a genuine fear, and we in law enforcement recognize that. We commit ourselves to providing excellent services for all the citizens in the city of Capitola. And we need the immigrant community to work with us rather than be fearful of us. We would never intentionally adopt or adhere to a policy that disturbs that. We are committed to making critical decisions that support the community and that would never create a division between the community and the police department. I wanted to make sure that I provided that information for council and the public. Thank you again for giving me a few minutes to talk about the recent ICE investigation here in Capitola earlier in the month on March 7th and to talk about some of our specific policies. Thank you very much.
Any questions, Council, of the Chief? No? Thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate that. And you give me the opportunity to hold off on the consent calendar so I can mention Operation Surf. It is a program where they bring wounded veterans from the Veterans Hospital in Texas. They bring them to our California shore and they teach them how to surf. They will have their opening ceremonies this year for the first time. They always surf in Capitola, but they're having their opening ceremonies here tomorrow. We have a motorcade coming in at 8:30 a.m. Any and all and everyone should be welcome to get out on the sidewalk and the streets, welcome them into our town. The motorcade will turn onto the Esplanade and drive the length of the Esplanade, where these wounded veterans will make their way to the bandstand for the opening ceremonies. And then after the opening ceremonies, they will commence surfing on our break. And you need to go see this. I'll leave it at that. Next, the consent calendar. They are a number of items that are taken in a single vote. Is there anyone from the council or the public that would like to pull any of the consent items? Seeing none, is there a motion to move consent?
Move the consent.
We have a motion by Potorf and a second by Bertrand. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Unanimous. We'll go on to general government and public hearings. The first item is the appeal of a director decision not to relinquish a public right-of-way. Staff, your report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, City Council. By way of background, staff issued a fence permit in September 2015 for the property at 211 Monterey Avenue in the village. And by doing so, staff erred by not recognizing the extent of the encroachment in the public sidewalk and the need for a private improvement and encroachment permit to place the fence as requested. The subject location is a busy village sidewalk used by the public for many decades, and the proposed fence would displace an approximately 6-foot by 30-foot area of the sidewalk. I would point out that 6 foot's kind of a maximum. The area kind of goes in and out, so there's areas that are somewhat narrower. The proposed fence area is currently occupied by plastic fencing and planters. We have requested that the applicant remove those obstructions. While the appeal is pending, they have declined that request. The fence location as requested is inconsistent with several of our general plan goals, including policy land use element 7.2, which asks us to ensure that all improvements of public infrastructure, including roadways, parking, and sidewalks, support a pedestrian-friendly environment. Additionally, our mobility element includes a policy that we maintain a complete system of sidewalks to provide safe, attractive, and convenient pedestrian circulation in Capitola. And then finally, a separate mobility element goal is to identify and inventory obstacles and obstructions on sidewalks in Capitola and to eliminate or mitigate these obstacles as funding becomes available. Additionally, the proposed fence location will be contrary to City Council goals to preserve and enhance village sidewalks, as evidenced by recent City Council actions to enhance and widen sidewalks in the village, and its recent focus on removing obstacles such as sandwich board signs along the village sidewalks. In addition, there's a concern of the precedence that this project would set. If we allowed this encroachment, it's very possible that other property owners in the village would request similar encroachments. Staff did propose a compromise with the property owner to allow an approximately 30-inch encroachment. The proposed compromise would leave an approximately 9-foot sidewalk in front of the property, and this would be consistent with what we've allowed at 213 Monterey Avenue next door and at 307 Capitola Avenue, where there's approximately a 3.5-foot wide landscaped area. The applicant also declined this proposal. The applicant has suggested that there are 4 village properties which have similar sidewalk encroachments. At 210 Monterey Avenue, the Thai Basil Restaurant; 110 Monterey Avenue, Britannia Arms; 127 Monterey Avenue, the historic cottage, which you may know is the original City Hall building on Lawn Way; and 312 Capitola Avenue, the Corkin Fork, and I'll review those briefly. 210 Monterey Avenue, the Thai Basil Restaurant. The area in question is an outdoor restaurant seating area. It fronts a 9-foot sidewalk, and there's no evidence that staff can find that this area has ever been used as a public sidewalk. 110 Monterey Avenue is a Britannia Arms site. Again, this area has been used as an outdoor restaurant seating area, fronts an approximately 9-foot sidewalk, and staff could find no evidence that this area has ever been used as a public sidewalk. 127 Monterey, this is the cottage on Lawn Way. The area in question is a residential landscaped area. Again, it fronts an approximately 9-foot wide sidewalk, and we can find no evidence that this area has ever been used as a public sidewalk. Finally, 312 Capitola Avenue at the Corkin Fork. This is an existing commercial plaza and patio. In size, it's similar to the 211 Monterey property, and it fronts about a 6-foot wide sidewalk. But like the other examples, staff could find no evidence that this area had been previously used as a public sidewalk. Therefore, staff is recommending the council uphold staff's decision not to issue a private improvement permit and relinquish a public sidewalk as requested by the applicant. Thank you.
Are there any questions of staff? Seeing none, I'll invite the Mr. Beck, the representative, and/or Dr. Katz to come up and address the council. Welcome.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, City Council. I am David Beck, and I represent Dr. Katz and his wife Kate, and you've heard for yourself that their son is also with us today. I appreciate the opportunity to be heard. We know that we have an uphill battle here given the staff recommendation. There is another side of the story, and I'd like to go over what that is. All we ask is due consideration. That's all we can ever ask. I'm going to take a few minutes to go through the facts. With the help of the clerk, I was able to get a packet in front of you that contains some of these exhibits, and I'll make reference to those as I go through them. And then after that, I'd like to suggest why this proposed fence really isn't in conflict with the objective of the general policy to keep, or the general plan, the policy of the general plan to keep pedestrian traffic moving efficiently. Dr. Katz and his wife bought the property in 2011. It had 3 units in it, starting at the street, going back away from the street, and we can call them units A, B, and C. And right from the get-go, and this is not anything that they were necessarily unaware of, but there are peeping Toms that can go right up to their window and literally, in some cases, put their nose on the window and look in, that window that's almost in the picture right there. In addition, this is sort of the layout there. Monterey Avenue is out here, and this is the edge of the sidewalk. In this area, there's a lot of public urination. A lot of trash collects right there. The window that people put their nose against is right here. And people will store things. Day visitors will also store things behind a little gate that exists right here. And so Dr. Katz and his wife inquired about a fence in August of 2015, and they were told that they probably could have one. And then a little bit after that, they were told in an email, also August of 2015, and this is Exhibit A and page 2, they were told that they may install a fence on the property line. The application, I understand, did contain a plot plan, if you will, or a bird's eye view of the property that indicated where the fence would go. When I requested a copy of the file related to the fence permit, which is Exhibit B, that wasn't in there. What Dr. Katz tells me is that the property line would actually eat up a good portion of the sidewalk, and recognizing that, he came into the planning department and notified it of this problem, and I think it was Ryan Safety, but in any event, some planner then on the spot took some kind of bird's eye drawing and drew a line from this point, which is a corner of a building next door to Katz, down to this point, and said that the fence could run on that line. The property line would actually have taken the fence out into the sidewalk, which of course would be absurd. In any event, based on this, and I think it's important to understand that, well, they did get a permit then, and that was issued in September of 2015. The issue came up in February of 2016 about this location of the property line and how the fence actually could not be on the property line. And so it was in February of 16 that the drawing was made running the fence from the corner of the building on one side to the corner of the building on the other. This was a permit that was valid and not rescinded, if you will, for a couple of years. And based on the validity of this permit, some decisions were made. Dr. Katz and his wife decided to combine units A and B, and they got a permit and did so and live in it now. The other decision they made in relation to believing that this fence permit was operative and valid is that they moved here, and they moved into the now combined A and B unit. Without the fence, they may have combined B and C or may not have combined anything. It was with belief that the urination problem and the storage problem and the peeping Tom problems and things like that would go away, that they combined the A and B. If you refer to Exhibit G, and this might be the most helpful of all of them, you'll get a good understanding as to what the sequence of events have been with regard to where this fence can go. I think it's on the 4th page of Exhibit G. There's a drawing that looks like this, labeled A. And you can see how the dark black line is running from corner of building to corner of building, capturing all of that area in yellow. That is what was proposed at that February 2016 meeting after Dr. Katz and his contractor recognized that the original plan, the property line, putting the fence on the property line, would have gobbled up the sidewalk. And you can kind of see the property line there faintly and how that would have happened. The next page of this exhibit shows what Dr. Katz proposed to fix the problem. The reason there was a problem that needed fixing is because he got a notice, and I'm actually not clear whether it was a notice or to stop work or a request from the city to stop work on the fence. In any event, he honored that and ceased work on the fence despite the fact that the posts and the planks had been purchased and sanded and painted, and a couple of the posts were actually installed, and they are there to this day. And he had a little over, and still does have a little over, $5,000 into it. Well, when he was requested to stop work on the fence, he did so, and then a meeting was requested. I attended it. Mr. Jesberg was there, and Mr. Katz was there. I think this was November of 17. And Mr. Jesberg told us what he felt the city's needs were, and they're all legitimate. One is to maintain the sidewalk wide enough to facilitate smooth flowing pedestrian traffic. One was to maintain access to the handicap ramp, and on any one of these Exhibit G exhibits, if you will, you can see the handicap ramp. Perhaps it shows up best on B with the HC there. And then the third city request was that any proposal that we make maintain access to the utility boxes, and you can see where the utility boxes are there as well. The applicant's needs, as expressed at that meeting, were to achieve privacy from the peeping Toms, to reduce the urination and the public storage, which again all takes place in this area, and to eliminate a trip hazard. We read in the staff report that and these are my words, not the report's words. I can't remember how the report expressed it, but essentially that there wasn't a concern about this trip hazard. And under the top page of that thing that I distributed to you is a photograph that was just taken today. And right in the middle of the photograph, you can see the handicap ramp, and then to the left of the handicap ramp is the trip hazard. Well, that is right here, where, frankly, the drunks pee and then walk away from. And that is the trip hazard that Dr. Katz has an interest in putting behind a fence so that it doesn't remain a danger to anybody. The proposal made in November of 16 is attached to Exhibit C, which includes the cover letter, and the drawing is there. It is the very same proposal that is that Exhibit B, or Attachment B, if you will, to Exhibit G. And we believe that that accommodates everybody's concerns. The handicap ramp is still accessible. The utility boxes are, for reasons I'll get to in a moment, and I know this is the big ticket item. I don't think it impedes the free flow of pedestrian traffic. It will eliminate the trip hazard, or hide it anyway. It will get rid of the peeping toms and the storage and things like that. So we thought it was a pretty good idea. The city didn't, and the city essentially suggested that, flipping one page to Attachment C, that 3 feet or 30 inches, I heard here tonight, right in front of and parallel to the face of the Katz home is something that we should consider as an alternative. And as I think the city manager or someone over here said, that idea was rejected. I would like now to speak to the policy objective as we understand it, being part of the general plan to keep the pedestrian traffic moving there. If you will, that is an hourglass, and if you pour a bunch of sand in at the top, that sand can't get to the bottom any faster than it can get through that bottleneck and that bottleneck. And it doesn't matter how wide this area in the middle is. Well, similarly, that's what we have with Dr. Katz. On one side of his property, we have 5.5 feet from corner of building to edge of sidewalk. That's one bottleneck. Down here, we have the exact same 5.5 feet, and everything in the middle is wider. So if you think about it, if the fence is in front of Dr. Katz's house like this, or even if it's further out, or even if it almost, but not quite, runs from corner to corner, it's not going to affect how many people can get through these two bottlenecks in any given fixed amount of time. And so we acknowledge that the free flow of pedestrian traffic is important, but we really don't think we're impacting it for this reason. He is not creating the bottleneck. The bottleneck is on either side of him already. Essentially, and I guess in sum, I would say that we're here tonight not because a fence permit was rejected, but rather because it was issued and it was relied on and believed to be valid and decisions made on it for a period of 2 years before it was rescinded. And I hope you can appreciate the equities and how this is different from those cases where a fence, an application for a fence is just outright rejected. there were serious decisions made on a belief in the validity of it, and I guess Dr. Katz feels like feels a little burned, frankly, because, as I say, these decisions were made on it, thinking he could believe what he was told and what he was issued, and was valid for 2 years before it was taken away. I'm happy to answer any questions to the extent I can. If I can't, I can whisper to Dr. Katz, or maybe even he could address the council too.
Council, do you have any questions of Dr. Katz's representation? None? Would Dr. Katz like to speak to us, or not? It's open forum here.
Sure, I'm willing to.
You're welcome to.
I appreciate that. I really want to thank you for your time, and thank you, Dave. I just wanted to say one statement is that a lot of decisions were made on my behalf, really relying on the validity of the issued permit, and I can't stress that enough. It's a lot of planning went into it. I was doing this with the city, with their advice, and only after the permit was issued did I decide, okay, I feel like I can remodel this property into a nice home for me and my family, and enjoy living there. And after all the remodel was made, only then the permit was rescinded, after I'm about $150,000 into the project. So that's what I wanted to share. And again, thank you for considering my issue.
Is there anyone else in the public who would like to address the council on this item? Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you, Mayor Termini. I can't help but be sympathetic to Dr. Katz, having also spent many sleepless nights feeling terrorized by the city government in a very similar case. So I took the liberty of going out and doing some measurements, specifically along the lines of the bottleneck issue and this pedestrian-friendly concern, which is a legitimate concern. And I noticed that along that area the bottlenecks occur when there's a post or there's a tree that you see in that will restrict a stroller or something from getting by. And the other bottlenecks typically are about 59 inches from whatever the street post or whatever it is in that area. And where the existing fence is now, it's 51 inches from the existing fence you see the corner of that tree grate. Now, assuming the tree is going to grow to that size, you would say, okay, well, his is narrower than even the narrowest on elsewhere on Monterey. But if you measure from the house to that same tree grade, it's 112 inches. So if you take 59 inches from that, say, okay, let's be consistent in our bottleneck, you have 53 inches, which is like almost 4.5 feet from his house. Now, the city recommended 3 feet or 30 inches or whatever, but you could go to 4 feet, and perhaps to save legal fees and staff time, we could promote a compromise and perhaps approve something in this meeting rather than sending it back to staff. Approve something in this meeting which is a compromise, let's say a 4-foot fence or something, and perhaps the doctor would agree to that and we could just end this now. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the council? I have one more. We're going to bring it back to the council now for comments. I have a question of staff. Can anyone not produce the plot plan in whatever form it was that was provided to us when we gave the initial permit in error?
The only quote-unquote plot plan that we have in the file is a image, Google image, taken off the internet with a black marker drawn with a box around the front of the building.
Do we have that at our disposal tonight, or no?
I believe we do.
I didn't see it in my packet. Or is it in? It could have been in here, and I didn't see it.
Black line. Really not very good.
Mr. Mayor, I think that's part of Exhibit B.
Exhibit B is in boy?
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Beck.
Is this it?
That's it.
That's it. And that 3.5 represents the height of the fence? So this is a plan view. This is not a plan view. This is an elevation. So did we not have an aerial view?
I have no evidence in the record of the files that there was a plan view submitted.
I do have one page in Exhibit B that seems to be an aerial view, but of a scale that's really hard to determine. Were we given this? It's Exhibit B, and it's page, looks like 1, 2, 3, page 4, Exhibit B.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we had that
it.
in the file as well. So an aerial image off of Google Maps as well.
Oh, my. And again, that 3.5 feet is the height of the fence?
Correct.
Got it. Okay, we'll bring it back to council. Stephanie, would you like to start?
Yes, I think that I think we're all very sympathetic because you were given the wrong information, but we also have plans to keep our sidewalks and as pedestrian friendly as possible. So I could support something small there, but nothing. I don't think anything big.
Very good. Jacques?
No comments at this time.
No comments. This is the last time to comment. So think about it. I'll come back to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Kristen?
Yeah, I agree with what
Cross-examine the witness.
Councilwoman Harlan said, which is I am sympathetic to the situation that you find yourselves in. I do have concerns that it is inconsistent with the general plan goals. I do have concerns about coastal access, and I know that the Coastal Commission has also expressed such concerns. And also, as mentioned in the presentation, that this essentially sets precedents, and that in the future, anything allowed in error will be expected to be permitted. And so I do have concerns about allowing this particular fence as planned or as proposed.
Ed?
Yeah, this is unfortunate. And what I'm afraid of here is that there's no winners in this situation, because I know that since I've been on this council, we've taken tremendous efforts to, at every possibility, widen sidewalks wherever possible. I think one of the parcels that was mentioned in here was the Corkin Fork Restaurant. We started with that program as a joint effort to improve sidewalks and allow access. Extended that all the way through the Esplanade on Capitola Avenue. And the problem point here is that Monterey Avenue, because of its access, one of the main entrances, if not the main entrance into the city, the sidewalk on the other side of the street becomes difficult to deal with because of the different elevations. So any minimization of the space on this side of the street just goes against what the other council members mentioned. On the other hand, I can be sympathetic towards the impact of somebody putting their nose on my window. So I believe there was some interaction with the city manager to try to reach a compromise, and I think that's where we're at. What that number is going to be is something that I think, something that I feel that I would be comfortable with. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to, first of all, deny the appeal as recommended by staff.
Excuse me, Councilman, can we take this in two slices?
I would be happy to do that. So my first motion will be to deny the appeal of and uphold staff's determination to deny a private improvement permit and go for code permit 2 of Monterey.
Second.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Jacques, would you like to comment on that motion, the denial of the appeal?
No.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to deny the appeal, and we will take this to the next step after this vote to see where the council feels they have consensus on recommendations to staff. So I'd like to have a roll call vote for this, please.
Councilmember Harlan?
Aye.
Councilmember Bertrand?
Aye.
Councilmember Peterson?
Aye.
Councilmember Botorff?
Aye.
Mayor Termini?
Aye. I'd now like to engage in a discussion on recommendations to staff on how to proceed, and if I could put something forward. I know we're all looking at the staff's recommendation of around 32 inches, plus or minus. I'm not going to take it by the 3 feet. 33 inches. Like I said, let's not make this an argument of inches. I might say that you could make this a more desirable compromise for the applicant if you allowed him to exceed the fence height of 3.5 feet. That, it could privatize that area considerably if we were flexible with that particular zoning ordinance. And it would be more consistent with a residence being there than a commercial property, but I will leave that to staff. But that is something I'd like to at least discuss, or anything else the council would like to discuss with regards to a compromise.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead and make it in the form of a motion, and I would be open to friendly amendments to that. But what I'm willing to do at this point, because I'm trying to reach a compromise, is I believe that at the point where the building is starts on Upper Monterey, the distance is 33 inches, and about the best access you're going to do on that window is 33 inches, and I'm okay with keeping it consistent. So what my motion is to allow 33 inches for the entire length of the property with a fence of 3.5 feet. I'm not sure the legality of that. Staff may get back to us, and I think there may be an issue like they're nodding. So my motion at this point is to approve for them to privatize 33 inches parallel to the front of their building. In addition to that, I would want to refund their fence permit fee. I would also want to refund the appeal fee. And I would also want the city to take on the expense to correct the return on the handicap ramp so that it is elongated and does not begin its rise until the point of 33 inches away from the building, which would involve modifying that curve and possibly any associated flat work that's in the vicinity of that to accomplish that task.
Is there a second for that motion? Jacques is seconding it. Before we discuss this motion, staff, was I completely off the wall with talking about perhaps loosening our standards for fence height? A lawyer just told me I was off the wall, so I had to accept that.
Between the portion of the private property in front of the setback line established by the zoning ordinance or any other ordinance of the city, and that portion in front of the front line of any residence or other principal building now erected on any private property to a maximum of 3 feet, maximum height of 3 feet 16 inches.
I fully understand what our ordinance says. What I'm saying is, do we have the ability to grant a variance in this case?
A variance has not been noticed for this hearing, if that has any bearing on it.
Well, remember, we're not determining what staff's going to do. We're making a recommendation now. So is that something that the applicant can pursue?
Mr. Mayor, I also in question that is, would there be a difference between the solid fence and a
lattice top. I'm sure we'll hear about that.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, so under our code, there is a provision that could allow a higher fence in the front yard by the Planning Commission. My suggestion from a design standpoint and sort of community character standpoint is tall fences in village character, don't lend themselves well to village character. And I think potentially the applicant would have an uphill battle with the Planning Commission getting approval for something higher than 42 inches in the front yard in the village with the Planning Commission. So I'm not sure whether that's a path on which there'd ultimately be success.
I'm trying to create success for both of us.
So, Mr. Mayor, I think the primary point you're looking after is just trying to increase the level of privacy that's available in the house, and I think that could be accomplished through landscaping. I know that there's an example just down the street here, and I believe it's 307 Capitola Avenue, which is a residential use between different commercial uses down there in the lower village. And they have a similar situation. They have a landscaped area in front of their windows, which is landscaped with, I believe it was shown in the PowerPoint, a fair number of ferns, and it provides that screen and that level of buffer between the building and the street.
So if there was a 5 feet of lattice to allow the vines to grow on, it probably would be acceptable. Okay. You see where I'm trying to go with this?
The lattice would be problematic. The hedge itself is not.
You're making it very hard here. I'm trying to
if the
solemnize
lattice
this.
Fixed to the fence, then it's still part of the fence. But if the lattice is against the wall,
Okay, then I will do this. I will ask for a friendly amendment that this recommendation that to give staff latitude in order to consider privacy, but to maintain your initial motion of the 33 inches.
I don't know if it's necessary to amend the motion. I think the point that's being made here that I think is loud and clear is that it would not be unacceptable to have an independent lattice that was not tied to the fence. And if that were to be 5 feet, it would be considered landscaping and not a portion of the fence. And if that point's made clear, I think it's understood.
I think we all understand that, and since this isn't a direction to staff, this is a recommendation from the council for staff to work in this direction. I think we can safely say, all in favor?
I have a friendly amendment. So the city did the sidewalk changes, and there's a lot of bricks there that are personalized bricks, and I'd like to preserve those bricks in a public right-of-way.
No problem if it would be relocated to another area.
Yeah,
Right.
that's all.
Absolutely accept that.
Good. All in favor?
Aye.
Does that include the variance for the?
No, there's no variance. We're
This
just
is a, if I may clarify, this is a
recommendation.
recommendation.
This is only a recommendation
This
to
is not a
staff.
motion to approve anything. This is just getting the consensus of the council for their
Right,
recommendation.
and we're suggesting to staff that they work with the applicant, that, some privacy elements be built into the landscaping when they move this.
That's fine with me. I just wouldn't support variance.
We wouldn't want to use the R word. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? You have the council's direction. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda. Which is
General plan.
proposed general plan cleanup.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Staff's before you this evening to discuss some staff proposed general plan amendments, largely intended to correct some inconsistencies between the existing general plan and the recently adopted zoning code. I'll go through these pretty fast, but if there's any questions, feel free to stop me. First, we'd like to update the land use map to align with the zoning map and correct any errors that were overseen during the general plan land use map. We also want to update the park information in the general plan, specifically with McGregor and the Rispin Mansion parks. We want to clarify the development intensity controls for mixed-use designations. We'd like to add a disclaimer that multifamily density is controlled by both the general plan and zoning code to close the density bonus loophole that I'll explain a little bit more in the presentation. We propose to eliminate the visitor accommodation land use designation in the general plan to make that consistent with the visitor serving district, which we eliminated in the zoning code. We'd like your direction on whether we should clarify that the additional floor area ratio in the village for a hotel is intended only for the Capitola Theater site or for any property in the village. And then finally, we want to clarify that 41st Avenue, the additional floor area ratio allowance applies to the entire mall property, which would be consistent with the new zoning language.
Go ahead, continue.
I'm going to go through several of the mapping changes again pretty quickly. Stop me if you have any questions. The first one is 502 Bay Avenue. These are portions of Gale's restaurant and of the parking lot. The zoning code has these as commercial neighborhood, and the new code is mixed-use neighborhood. The general plan had them incorrectly designated as multifamily, so we want to correct that mistake. The next one are some parcels along Blue Gum and Riverview. Zoning code has these designated as R1. The general plan mismapped this area and had them as mixed-use neighborhood, so we want to correct that mistake and make them single-family residential. There are several parcels on Bromer Street that are currently community commercial. During the zoning code update process, those neighbors asked for a multifamily designation, so we'd like to align the general plan and zoning maps for these properties. 911 Capitola Avenue, this is currently occupied by the Day Spa, the former English Tea Shop. The zoning code has these designated as mixed-use neighborhood. The general plan had them as residential multifamily, so we want to correct that and make it also mixed-use neighborhood. Across the street at 912 Capitola Avenue is a site occupied by apartments. This site was mismapped as a mobile home park in the general plan, so we simply want to correct that and change it to multifamily. We have 3 parcels that are multifamily on Center Street. The zoning code designated these as multifamily residential. They were single-family residential in the general plan, so we want to align those designations. 219 Central Avenue, these are apartments at the base of Depot Hill. General plan has them designated as single-family, recognizing the underlying use. We propose to change those to multifamily. There are several parcels on Dazzle Lane. This is south of Jade Street. It's a planned development of residential project, and we propose to change it from community commercial to single-family residential. There are a number of properties. I'm not going to go through each of these on Depot Hill. These changes are largely a result of us eliminating the visitor serving land use designation. We're proposing to change the designations here largely to R1 with a visitor serving overlay, which will have the same effects as the former visitor serving zone. 410 Kennedy Drive, this site is currently occupied by industrial uses. We had mismapped it as part of the courtyard and want to change that designation to recognize it as industrial property. 250 Monterey Avenue, this is the Capitola Depot Inn site. This site currently has general plan designation of automatic review and visitor serving. Those designations have been eliminated, so we're proposing to change it to single family with a visitor serving overlay. 865 Monterey Avenue, this was mismapped as open space when in fact there's some single family residence behind the existing church. Opal Cliffs Drive, these sites are developed currently with condominiums. They were designated as single family. We want to change that, recognizing the land use, to multifamily. 727 Rosedale was a mapping error. It was designated as a residential quasi-public use, and we want to change that to multifamily to be consistent with the zoning designation. The Shadowbrook parcels are currently visitor accommodations. Again, this is a designation we're going to eliminate, and we're proposing to change that with mixed-use neighborhood with a visitor serving overlay. And then finally, one that was not in the staff report is a result of our latest discussions during the zoning code update to change the north end of Capitola Road from community commercial to mixed-use neighborhood. Moving on, as I mentioned, we want to update some of the park information in the general plan. This would simply be to note that the Rispin Mansion Park is now proposed and to delete planned from the completed McGregor Park site. The mixed use and floor area ratio, the general plan controls development intensity and the mixed use land use designations through floor area ratio. There's been some questions whether or not a residential project in a mixed use zone should be also subject to density. We'd like to clarify that it's only subject to floor area ratio and not both density and floor area ratio. So the multifamily residential density, this change is intended to address the density bonus loophole that we discovered while processing the recent density bonus project. During that process, we learned that the city was obligated to allow the property owner to develop at the highest density prescribed by either the general plan or the zoning code. The general plan applies a 20 dwelling unit acre maximum for all multifamily designations, where the zoning code breaks those up into 3 designations based on 10, 15, or 20 dwelling units an acre. So I worked with the city attorney's office to develop language to make it clear that the most restrictive would apply so that we don't have an overdeveloped multifamily property. Visitor accommodations, I mentioned, we propose eliminating this designation and replacing it with underlying zoning that complies with surrounding land uses and placing a visitor serving overlay on top of it. The Village Hotel floor area ratio, the Planning Commission had previously requested that the general plan be amended to clarify that the additional floor area ratio only apply to the former Capitola Village Theater site. And so we're seeking your direction tonight whether the language should be modified or if you want that language to apply to the entire village. 41st Avenue, as I mentioned, this is simply to make it very clear that the additional floor area ratio applies to the entire mall property, not just the portion of the property that fronts 41st Avenue. The Planning Commission considered this item last month. They voted to recommend that staff proceed with the proposed general plan amendment. They did have some additional recommendations for the council, including that the council does clarify that the floor area ratio allowance in the village only applies to the former theater site, that we also consider changing the name of the residential single-family designation in the general plan to R1 to be consistent with the general plan, and make a similar change to the residential multifamily designation to simply RM. And then finally, they ask that you consider allowing an extended public review period. So the next steps, if authorized by the council tonight, is what staff will prepare a general plan amendment package, necessary maps, and a CEQA document. The state law requires a 45-day public notice period. We can certainly extend that at your desire. Then we'd return to the Planning Commission for a recommendation, City Council for adoption, and at the end of it all, we'll publish and distribute an amended general plan. So that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Questions, council? Seeing none, anyone from the audience like to address the council on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Jacques, would you like to start? Anything to say?
Nope, I'm fine.
Stephanie?
I'm good.
Kristen? Ed?
I'm good. I'm good with the recommendation of the Planning Commission, and I'm okay with extending the public comment period to 60 days.
And the Planning Commission, could you enumerate anything else they had concerns about?
That was it. We did invite their comments. I called, I think, all the members beforehand, invite them to look at the general plan. I think if there was anything else they wanted to change. The only things they asked for was to change the designations to make the nomenclature consistent.
Very good.
I just have one question. So in terms of the spa property, would it be easier for the developer if that was all combined in one parcel?
That would be their choice. I mean, I generally recommend against property owners consolidating lots.
Okay.
But if they wanted to consolidate them, that's a process we could help them with.
But the zoning extends over the
Yeah,
parcels.
so it'd be, once we're done with this, the zoning and general plan designations will be consistent over their entire ownership.
Do I have a motion?
Okay. So move to accept staff recommendation.
And extend the review period to 60 days?
Yes.
Very good. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. Our last item on our agenda is a report on Soquel Creek Management Plan. And I think we have our creek expert in residence here. Hey, Don.
See, I made hard copies of my my notes here. Yeah. Also,
Thanks, sir.
the last minute prepared a PowerPoint.
Maybe I'll go over here. I'll get it. I got it first. I got it, Steve.
Yeah, actually, James is going to show them. Okay. I'm not going to show them right away.
Okay.
I'll let you know. Yeah, I'm Don Alley. I've been your fish biologist for 27 years. Susan Westman hired me originally in 1990 after we completed the first lagoon management plan in California. For Soquel Creek, we did it, Soquel Lagoon, and once we completed that, I was hired to implement the plan and monitor the lagoon after that. And Stephanie Harlan was here when that all started. It's been a long time. I appreciate all of your service that you folks give to the city. The current state of the lagoon management, I completed a lagoon management plan update in 2004, which helped me incorporate knowledge that I gained between 1990 and 2004 to manage the lagoon. And we've been following that management plan update since then. The city's done a very excellent job in following the plan. Also in 2004, I provided the fisheries section of an additional watershed plan.
Don, can I ask you to get closer to the microphone? Sorry. Go right ahead.
A watershed plan that covered the entire watershed but separate from the lagoon. And that was produced by the Resource Conservation District, both of them in the same year. In order to restore Steelhead and Co. in the watershed, it'll require following both plans. And unfortunately, the watershed plan hasn't been implemented to a great extent. So I think I'll be talking about things that can be done in the upper watershed and within the lagoon tonight. Steve Jesberg, Ed Morrison, and Matt Catilla have been key in following the management plan for a number of years. Matt has followed in his grandfather's footsteps. Bill Castellano and working at the sandbar. You know, they construct the sandbar each early summer. And the lagoon is really the most valuable steelhead habitat in the watershed. These steelhead spend a couple of years out in the ocean. They get really large, usually about 2 feet long, and they migrate in the winter and spring and spawn as far upstream as they can go. And then their young spend 1 to 2 years in fresh water. And later in the season, the adults don't get up quite as far. They spawn close to the lagoon, and many of their young come down into the lagoon. Also, some yearlings come down into the lagoon to use the lagoon during the summer. And fish grow probably 3 to 4 times faster in the lagoon than anywhere else in the watershed because there's so much food there. And the bigger the juveniles are when they go out to the ocean, the better chance they have of coming back as adults. So the lagoon is a really important resource for the steelhead, and the city's done a very good job of following the management plan. There are 5 different permits the city has to obtain to continue to build the sandbar and manage the lagoon. And the city just managed to renew its Army Corps permit, which is usually a 5-year permit. Besides that, there's the permit from California Fish and Wildlife, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the California Coastal Commission. And Danielle Huriet has been key in securing these necessary permits. Before she came along, Ed Morrison was responsible for that. The city is starting on a Flume improvement project at this point. That Flume is really the only thing that allows us to manage the lagoon properly. And it's a very unique structure. It's the only one I know of along the California coast. And there's been a Flume there since the early 1900s. Originally, there was a Flume that was connected to the paper mill 3 miles upstream, and they would get rid of their waste material through that wooden Flume. And then in the 50s, our current Flume was built. But it's really suffered it's suffered through the years, and now this plan will repair cracks in the Flume, line the inside of the Flume, and then they'll put some wing walls underneath the Flume so that the Flume no longer leaks and water will have trouble getting from the lagoon underneath the Flume to the bay. If some of you walked out on the beach at times, sometimes they have to flag off the area right above the Flume because there are sinkholes that form. Water goes under the Flume, and then it washes some of the sand away, and you have these sinkholes. Well, now they're going to construct some wing walls, permanent wing walls, that will try to stop that. So let's start with the slides here. I always like to have at least a couple of slides of steelhead. Steelhead are in the salmon family. They're actually the strongest swimmer of all the different salmon. There are 6 or 7 species of salmon on the west coast here. They're also the only salmon that can survive after they spawn. All the other salmon species die after they spawn. But some of the steelhead can manage to go back to the ocean and come back again. Ed Morrison caught this, I think, on the eel. I have a little video for the next slide. Let's see if it'll work, though.
It will work. I just got it to go. Let's see if I can.
Shows Ed releasing, I think, that same fish, or maybe a bigger one. Big adult. They get quite large, and they're really strong. They really fight when you catch one. This is from the Eel River. Sorry, it's not straight up and down, but
I was trying to fix
I
it.
think it's important to hold on to that video. Seeing Ed actually release a fish that size
Yeah.
is very significant.
He releases most of his fish, and one of the reasons the lagoon is taken care of so well is because Ed is an avid fisherman. He really cares about these fish. Okay, unfortunately, we've had 7 of the last 11 years have been dry, and that's had a big impact on steelhead. They have trouble getting to their spawning grounds when there isn't enough flow. Their eggs don't survive very well. I used to be a teacher. It's hard for me just to stand at a podium. The eggs that are spawned don't always get enough oxygen because there's not enough flow. And then the young don't have much habitat once they come out of the gravels. So this is a graph that shows juvenile density on the y-axis.
Yeah, it doesn't show up on a screen.
Oh, you got one of those screens. So
Don,
the vertical axis is density of juveniles at different sampling sites I have in the watershed. And then the years along the bottom, along the horizontal axis. And as you can see, the red line is the average of all those sites. And in recent years, especially this year, 2017, or last year and the year before, the total densities were very low. You notice that one dotted line that's much higher than the others at the beginning, that's up in the Soquel Demonstration Forest on the East Branch. And 2 years of the drought in 14 and 15, that area had completely dried up. So there were no fish produced up there. But in general, the densities in the demonstration forest have really come down precipitously. Next slide. This slide shows the density of larger juveniles. I call them size class 2 and 3 juveniles. And you'll notice that although we didn't have, the total densities were very low in 2017, the density of larger fish really shot up at the end there. You see how the red line went up. That's because there were very few juveniles, but lots of stream flow in 2017, so there was very little competition, and what few young of the year fish came out of the gravels grew really quickly and large. So that's positive. So we had quite a few large ones. As for the lagoon, these are my population estimates through the years for our lagoon. We sample the lagoon in the fall. And in general, typically when we have a drier year, more fish spawn near the lagoon, and then our lagoon population goes way up. That's what happened in 2007 and 2008 there. But then we had several more drought years, and in 2014 and 15, there were so few fish in the lagoon, we couldn't even estimate the population. It requires a mark and recapture process, and we only caught a half a dozen fish the first weekend and tagged them, but we got no recaptures the second weekend, so we couldn't even get an estimate. The average lagoon density is around 1,500 fish. Our estimate was about 259 last fall. The lagoon had very excellent habitat. It's just that I don't think there are very many adults coming back now. So perhaps we can get several years in a row of wetter weather, they might bounce back. But at this point, I think the adult steelhead population is probably the lowest that we've had since I've been working in the stream. So what have we been doing to improve things? The city at the beginning of last summer, Ed Morrison and Matt Catilla planted some cattails under the railroad trestle. In the old days, before the bulkheads were built after the 55 flood, we had cattail marsh along the borders of Soquel Lagoon, and that provided a lot of habitat. Since the bulkheads, the cattails disappeared. So we're starting an experimental thing where we put these cattails in this little cove under the trestle, and we'll see if they survive these higher flows, and hopefully we can reintroduce them in other areas in the lagoon to restore our cattail marsh. This will also these cattails will also help clean the water, improve the water quality in the lagoon and in the ocean as well. So they have a benefit there. And here's a picture later in the summer of them underwater. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service put up a little sign next. They put up this sign to show that we're trying to restore some habitat here. Now I'll talk about some things that we could do to improve the lagoon. They're kind of big items, but one is that we have an old bridge here at Stockton Avenue that has abutments in the channel to support the bridge, and they will catch wood and potentially jam up on the bridge and cause flooding. So what the city has to do is if we have wood collecting in the lagoon or maybe up at Nob Hill, the city goes in and cuts the wood up into smaller pieces. And then the next large storm event, and they usually do that in the spring and summertime. But the next winter, the logs are so short that they get washed away. So they're not permanent habitat for the fish. So it would be a real benefit to have larger wood stay in the lagoon to increase the habitat complexity. The fish would have more places to hide under. Ducks would be able to roost on the wood if it's stuck out of the water. It'd be a more natural situation. So there's two possibilities here. Replace the bridge with a free span bridge with no abutments, which would be quite expensive. Be extreme inconvenience for the city here. It'd kind of cut the city in half. Usually when they build these bridges, they keep one lane open all the time. But even so, the congestion here in town is quite large in the summer. People might decide not to come to Capitola because of the problem. It might take a whole summer to rebuild the bridge. So I realize the problem's there, but you have to realize that the next two bridges upstream in Soquel Creek have been converted to free span bridges. We haven't had a major storm since 1982. In 1982, wood backed up on the Soquel Bridge more than 100 yards, more than 100 meters, maybe more than that, on that bridge. That bridge stopped the wood that would have come downstream. Well, that bridge is now free span. And they also made the Porter Street Bridge free span. So really the only restriction that's going to prevent the wood from jamming up on our bridge is Nob Hill. There is a constriction at Nob Hill. The stream comes down, it kind of hits Nob Hill by the shopping center, and then kind of goes around Nob Hill there. And wood does collect there, but during a big storm event, I think the wood's going to make it down to our bridge here. And in '55, there was an excavator out on the Soquel Bridge trying to remove wood during the storm. And I don't know what happened here at this bridge at that time, but we haven't had a big storm since those bridges were made free span. So there's a human reason to do something with this bridge, not just for fish, but for people, because if wood jams up on that bridge, you're going to pond up water upstream, the residences could flood, and then the water typically tries to go around a bridge once the wood jams up on it. That's what happened in Soquel, on Soquel Drive. The mobile home park there would get the brunt of the water going around and so forth. So there's a reason for the fish and the population here to do something with this bridge. Now, another option is to put these wing walls upstream of the abutments. And what they do is they turn the wood parallel to the current before it gets to the bridge. So that would lessen the possibility of having a log jam on the bridge itself. Now I realize that this is a historical bridge. It's been there as long as any of us have been around. I'm not sure what year it was built there. And it has aesthetic and historical value, but still, it's a hazard, and you need to think about that. Another thing you could do is if wood comes down into the lagoon, rather than cut it up, somehow secure it to the bottom with cables or to the banks with cables, and then at least there'd be wood there for the fish. They did that some over on the San Lorenzo Lagoon at one point. But it's kind of expensive to do, and that wood may come free at some point. So it's not the best solution, but it is a solution. I forgot to mention that on the Soquel Bridge, 90% of the wood that jammed up on that bridge in '82 was not in the creek when the storm started. Think about that. This watershed is subject to catastrophic landsliding and trees coming into the watershed all at once during a big storm event. So, another problem which is more doable is that what I've noticed is that since you banned cigarette smoking along the Esplanade, people are going behind the Esplanade restaurants and sticking their cigarette butts in every nook and cranny they can find, or they throw them under the wooden walkway there. And that's a problem for fish, because when those cigarette butts get into the water, into the ocean, fish eat those. They think it's food. So they're subjected to carcinogens, they're prone to cancer, they can't digest these cigarette butts, so it interferes with their digestion and excretion. So something needs to be done about that. I mean, it's a dramatic change. Hundreds of cigarette butts are stuck around nooks and crannies over there now. So I know it's a good intention to try to stop smoking down there, but this is what is happening. I don't know. No, I don't. At the end, I'll show you a picture of where I'm talking about it. I have those out of order. Another thing, now moving to the upper watershed, there's a waterfall on the west branch of Soquel Creek that steelheads seldom get above. This is a picture of it here. It's the Girl Scouts of America own property on the west side, and someone else owns property on the east. But this waterfall blocks 4 miles of steelhead habitat in the watershed. We have about 16 miles right now, but we could get another 4 miles of habitat if this waterfall was laddered or made more passable to steelhead. I wish I could point it out, but there's a kind of a two-step thing here. There's a pool. They have to jump up onto some bedrock and then make a second jump. And it's about 25 feet long, and it's a rarity for adults to make it over this. So increasing the access to the watershed would really improve the steelhead population. Next. So here's a typical fish ladder that could be made off-site and then brought in with a helicopter and put in place. Next. This is kind of what the inside of one of those looks like, a denille fish ladder. They're self-cleaning, so there's not a lot of maintenance to them. Next. Another alternative would be to put in check dams downstream of the waterfall to increase the stream's elevation when it finally reaches the waterfall itself. So instead of the waterfall being 15 feet high, it could be 5 feet high instead if you had enough of these check dams. Next. Here's a situation where people have put these rock weirs in to increase the elevation of the stream bed. Next. Another chronic problem in our watershed is that there are at least 2 major landslides areas in the watershed. The main one is the Highlands Way slide on the East Branch. It's above the Soquel Demonstration Forest. Highlands Way is above there, and it provides massive sediment to this watershed chronically. And sediment is very harmful to steelhead habitat. It destroys spawning habitat, it fills up pools, destroys rearing habitat. So working on this slide would be a major improvement. Next. Here's what it looks like above the Highlands Way. Next. This is on the west side. The main part of the slide would be to the right, but here's another portion of it to the west. Next. And then there's another slide that is, you can see from Castellano's Market up the watershed. If you look out to the east, you can see it. The creek takes a hairpin turn, and just beyond the turn is where this landslide is. And it's been there for many years. Bill Castellano talked about how when he was young, he and his friends would shoot their rifles at this landslide when they were kids from Castellano Market. So it's been there quite a while. Over the 2016-17 winter, we had so much rain that it became activated again. And the sampling site that I had below that slide just disappeared. The stream had to move over about 50 feet, and it was full of woody debris. Next. Here's another look at it. Here you can see the wood that has come down there. This spot is very accessible to vehicles. It could be worked on. So those are the two major slide areas that really need to be worked on, and nobody has seriously tackled it. It may cost millions of dollars to work on, but any improvement would help. Even just putting some kind of a barrier at the base so that debris can't make it into the stream would be a help. Next. Yeah, I'm just about finished here. This was a scene from this past early summer when they were finishing building the sandbar. Here they're putting sand on the visqueen that forms a pad around the entrance to the Flume. The place where the cigarette butts are deposited is over there by the pilings, just behind the restaurants. Next. Here's the crew eating some pizza after everything's done, having a late lunch. Ed Morrison provided the pizza, and you see these pilings that are sticking up along the walkway there. Well, there are cracks between the concrete and the wood, and they just use those as cigarette butt depositories. And then there's a gap. You have the walkway, and then you have the gap between the pilings that goes down into the sand, and a lot of people just throw their butts down into there. So I think there are solutions. I don't know how it would fit with your ordinance not have smoking, but you could certainly put some portable cigarette receptacles behind here. I know we have them up in the San Lorenzo Valley so that people could use them. The word I heard was that the ordinance is really not enforced back in this area here. So, and people have the habit, and they need to smoke somewhere. And so, anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Don. Any questions, Council?
One quick question.
Ed.
Yeah. Just, you had mentioned about the juveniles. I'm just curious, what's the average size of a juvenile entering the ocean?
Usually about 6 inches. Yeah, and they can most all the juveniles that live in the lagoon get large enough their first year, so they'll be 6 inches, at least 6 inches big to go to the ocean. Whereas fish in the upper watershed, it may take them usually takes them 2 years to get that big. And yearlings that come down in the lagoon, they get to be almost a foot long before they go out. So those are the ones that are really going to come back.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was just wondering if we have any plans to do any a removal of the non-native ivy again that we did a couple years ago.
Perhaps
Commission
our
on the
representative from the Commission on the Environment
That
could
was a
speak to
good
that.
project.
I can talk about that a little bit.
Also, in the creek management plan, it mentions planting natives and removing non-natives and removing pampas grass and things like that.
So, yeah, first of all, we have the Environmental Commission has been reconstituted this year, and we've had a couple meetings, and we're looking for volunteer things that we could get groups and work on. And so if there's anything you want to approach the Environmental Commission on and say, hey, we could use some help, gathering volunteers to do this or that or build a fish ladder. I mean, we just finished this big effort with the ivy pulling, and so we're now ready to move on. So the status of that Peary Park ivy pulling activity was we got to the point where the volunteers could only go so far, and then we needed a permit from the Fish and Game Department. So we went ahead with that, and Danielle Harriet's been working that pretty hard. And then there was an issue where we needed $1,500 in fees for some sort of paperwork submittal. And so because this city council approved the getting money from the tree fund of Rich Grunau's area to maintain the trees and keep them clear, there's funds now to keep the ivy out of the trees, and that basically extends to the creek. So the money is there. The $1,500 permit came from Rich's budget, and now we're basically waiting for our ecologist, George McMenamin, to get all those paperworks approved, get the approval, and his goal is in the neighborhood of August, September timeframe to spend 2 weeks with a crew and finish that ivy removal, because he doesn't want to have volunteers doing that because of the sensitivity of the bank and the poison oak and all those issues. So he wants a professional crew to go down there, and basically the volunteers have done as much as they can safely do without special training. So it's moving forward, but at a government pace.
Thank you. Any other questions, Council? Don, you had something else?
Something I forgot to mention. The creek, at least in the lower reaches, once had a redwood forest existing, and it has disappeared through the years. There are certain little areas where there are still redwoods, but one of the problems with the lower Soquel Creek below Castellanos Market and downstream is a lack of shading. The creek really heats up, and the water, when it reaches the lagoon here, is quite warm. So if we could restore the redwood forest along the creek with tall trees, we could cool that water down. It's not a small-scale project, and it's going to require cooperation with landowners all along the stream. But if we could plant redwoods and get them started, that would be a big improvement. So that has to do somewhat with vegetation.
Thank you, Don. Ed, do you have anything else? No one else? Any more comments from staff? All good. I think we have no action. We're just receiving that report. So I think it's time to say good night. Good night, Capitola. Good night, kids. Soquel High, right? Yeah. Good. Good night, Capitola. Be nice to each other.